So when it comes to real estate, people have all kinds of questions, and Dave and I field questions all day long. We get tons and tons of questions, but still the clients that we work with, even with the overwhelming number of you from YouTube that reach out to us on a daily basis, is still a small sample size of the questions that are out there. So we decided to look at what the internet's burning real estate questions are, the top 5 of those, and do a series for you answering all 5 of the number 1 top questions that people have about real estate in 2025. So to do this, we looked at Google, we looked at ChatGPT, and they, of course, lined up essentially identically with what the top questions were. It spit out the top 5 questions. We're going to cover them for you over the next 5 episodes, starting with today's question, which is the number 1 question we get in the comments, the number 1 question we get on the phone, and obviously the number 1 question that you guys are punching into ChatGPT at 2 in the morning, which is, should I buy now or wait? And there's a lot to unpack there with that question. We're going to get stuck right into it. In case you don't remember where you are, this is the Informed Homebuyer Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Rich Curtis, with my illustrious co-host with us once again, Dave Miller. Thanks for being here, Dave.
Thanks, Rich. Thanks for having me. Good afternoon. Actually, good morning, I guess, here. So
still just barely morning. All right, we're going to get stuck right into it with some ways to think about this. We're also going to give you some avatars. If you are this person, you should buy in 2025. If you're this person, probably shouldn't buy in 2025. Now, bear in mind, of course, that there is no blanket real estate advice that's good advice. Real estate is hyper local and hyper personal. So if by the end of this episode you still aren't sure, feel free to reach out to us via the contact information in the description down below, and we can assess your personal situation better. You also might want to know, what are the next 4 episodes going to be about? Maybe this one's not your cup of tea. We are also going to be going over, will home prices crash? How can I afford a home in this market? Strategies for that. What's the best way to negotiate in this market? Because things are a little different right now. People are asking a lot about that. And what are the hidden costs or mistakes that first-time home buyers make that can cost them tens of thousands of dollars, and how to avoid those? So those are the topics we're going to go over in the next one. But for this one, should you buy now or wait? How do you think about that? Let's go over sort of from the 30,000 foot view to start, Dave. Macroeconomically, the stuff that's going on in the market right now.
Yeah, well, I think what's happening right now, Rich, is we've had discussions about, what's the value of homes currently? Are they going to crater? Is, the market going to crash? We've been talking about previous podcasts that we're frozen, and that has to do with, the lock-in buyer or owner effect of current interest rates. We're seeing now interest rates gradually ease down. So we're below 7%. We're above 6.5% right now. Recently in the news this week, there was all kinds of crazy stuff going on with the jobs report or unemployment numbers that got revised, and a significant revision to that, which caused a firing for the Bureau of Labor Statistics chief. So, which is interesting to me is, what we kind of been waiting for is a Federal Reserve to come out and maybe make an adjustment to the Fed funds rate. They said they're going to hold pat, but then 3 days later, revised statistics come out. In my mind here is like, why couldn't we have those revised statistics before the Fed makes their decision, right? I mean, we're talking days, a matter of days. Like, let's get those numbers here, because now the indication is that there's a 80 to 90% chance that the Fed's going to lower rates at the next meeting. Again, that does not mean they lower a quarter basis points. That does not mean that we're going to see a quarter basis point reduction in mortgage interest rates. It's a move in the right direction. The 10-year note Treasury is hovering now at a reasonable level. So there's some things that if they hold steady, we're going to be okay, but we're not going to see the bottom fall out of interest rates and have them go down, in the 5s, even in the short term.
Yeah, I think that was the challenge is, originally when we, look at our last episode, we were going through what the Fed said, and Jerome Powell's like, well, jobs are down, but job demand is down. They're in lockstep. I'm not too worried about it. 3 days later, they revised numbers, and 250,000 less jobs for the previous reporting than they had said. And then this one was down. I think, we only added 70,000 jobs. So way less than projections, basically. And that painted a more bleak picture. And the reason this is sort of an impact is because the Fed's dual mandate is maximum employment and keeping inflation at their target of 2%. They've been pretty much only focused on the inflation component, which has meant that it makes sense to leave rates where they are. This jobs component, if it causes enough of an impact or enough fear, or at least puts itself on the table for the Federal Reserve Committee, then to Dave's point, it could result in the beginning of rates starting to step down at the Federal Reserve level. Now, again, that is the short-term rate that banks borrow money at, that the government borrows money at. It doesn't directly affect your interest rates, but it does have a small impact. So if we get, I mean, right now we only have 2 more meetings left for
Yep,
the
that
year,
is
right?
correct. Yeah, so we may see, it's expected to be a quarter point, and it potentially could be more. We'll see what happens but right now the projection's a quarter point, and then that follow-up meeting, we might see a quarter point, but that's still too far ahead and too much data to come out to make that prediction now. But again, not enough for if you're someone that's considering buying a home. I would not put the seatbelt on and wait for that. I would say, it's not gonna move the needle very much if it does.
Right, because right now we're talking, if we saw half a point, so 2 quarter point reductions in the Fed, we only have
Mhm.
2 options to reduce it unless they call an emergency meeting. And certainly in 2025, anything's possible to jump on the bingo card, right? But let's just say the world works reasonably normally. We have 2 meetings, 2 quarter point basis reductions, a half point total reduction in the Fed funds rate. What do we see? Maybe an eighth, maybe a quarter reduction in mortgage interest rates by the end of the
Yeah,
year?
that seems reasonable if we continue to trend in that direction. Yes, I could see if they a quarter, probably half of what they drop is what we might see in mortgage rate.
So that doesn't even really get us to 6.5 based on today's rate, or close to 6.5 by the end of the year, right?
Pretty close. But it
Yeah.
also has to do, there's some other factors there with them doing that in terms of, the mortgage-backed securities and what that bond market's going to continue to look like. And, we're seeing, we will see some improvement, but just not drastic improvement. Kind of hard to predict, but I could see us being sub 6.5 by the end of the year.
Yeah.
But again,
So I guess, well, what's that?
yep. Again, when we think about our typical buyer, we're talking on average, it's 35 to 40 bucks per eighth in interest rate per month. So if we see a quarter point increase, you're talking, $80 a month, 800 bucks, 860, what is that, 960 for the year? Not enough to move the needle in terms of saying, hey, I'm just going to wait before I buy a house.
Yeah, there's not a lot of definitives and a lot of 100% in real estate. But what I can say without question is that right now, if you're sitting at home and the difference between you affording to buy a house and not affording to buy a house is $80 a month, you should throw in the towel and not be trying to buy a house right now. You should be doing a little more savings, doing a little more work, working on the income. You are on too tight of a margin for it to be safe to be splashing around trying to buy a house in this market. So what that functionally means is, interest rate is a big criteria that's been talked about a lot, but in terms of deciding whether to buy in 2025 or not, if you're considering interest rate as one of the components of that, there's 2 ways to look at it. Either it's the wrong metric to make a decision because it's just not going to go anywhere, where there's not going to be relief in sight. So you need to, look at the other avenues to make your choice. Or if you are just such a rate sensitive person that if rates don't come down to this point, I'm not buying a house, then you can probably throw in the towel for 2025, at least right now, based on interest rate. Does that seem fair to say, Dave?
That seems very fair. And I think the other thing to really consider is who's giving you advice. One thing I look at is if you bought a house in the last 10 years and you have a sub 4 interest rate, you probably have plenty of equity and you have a pretty darn good rate, and you probably bought somewhere as the market was appreciating. So you have, like I said, a fair amount of equity. You're probably advising someone, oh, you're crazy, I wouldn't buy a house right now. Well, you don't have to buy a house right now if you're that person. Like, what if
Yeah.
if you were that person, you didn't own that home, you didn't have that interest rate, when would you buy? And that's the question I would ask them is,
Yeah.
and I'm not trying to encourage anyone to buy now versus buy later. We'll kind of go through those fundamentals, but consider who's giving you advice. Is it a realtor or a mortgage person that just wants your commission? We're not
Right.
saying, hey, buy now. We're giving you the information to help you make the decision. But if you're listening to folks that already own a home and have a sub 4 interest rate, they're going to tell you, oh, I wouldn't buy a house right now. Well, of course you would, because you're in a great
Yeah.
position. So.
Well, and on the flip side, if you're listening to someone who, just has the commission angle, then now's always the best time to buy, right? Like there's videos on my channel. We should do an update on this because I haven't done one in a couple of years, but of how to pick a realtor. And the easiest first question I tell people is just call them up and ask them, is now a good time to buy or sell? If they say yes, then hang up and call somebody else, because the true answer is, I don't know. Let me ask you some questions, right? Like, what are your goals? How long are you going to hold the house? What's your income picture? What's your debt picture? What are you looking to do? How stable is your employment? There's a lot of questions that go into deciding whether now is the right time for you to buy a house or not. And if someone's just saying now is a great time, then you know that advice is only serving one person, the person giving it,
Right.
But so if we look at criteria to decide whether to buy in 2026 or not, I'd say interest rate is either off the table, or if it's a go, no go for you, it's a no go. So if you're just a rate sensitive person, then 2025 is not your time. I might have said 2026 there. Maybe I'm already done with the 2025 real estate market, Dave, and put my brain in 2026.
It's feeling like it. It's feeling,
tired
yeah.
of the news. Tired of the news.
Right.
Now, next one is price, right? So if you can't make homes more affordable via interest rate, the other way to make homes more affordable is via price. And the third way to make them more affordable is your personal savings coming with more money down, so the payments come down lower. So if we look at price, let's talk a little bit about what price is expected to do. And this one is, I feel, less definitive than interest rate, because there's a lot going on with price right now. So one of the big things that affects price is inventory. And you'll see, if you looked at recent news, inventory is way up nationwide. Inventory is even way up in a lot of our personal markets. But what we're not seeing is inventory being retained at high levels. So we're seeing inventory come way up and then not get gobbled up by people buying, but get reduced by people removing their listings, because it's those people that Dave was talking about who have those low interest rates, who have that high equity, and they're going to throw a testing price out there. And if they don't get what they want, they're like, well, I can stay. I've already got mine. I'll just stay. And so they're pulling those back off the market. So we're having this sort of fluctuation in inventory, combined with buyers being nervous enough not to buy, or being not willing to pay the price the sellers are asking. That's keeping the market in a little bit of stasis price wise. If sellers don't come down on price and we don't get a closed comparable sale at a lower price, then prices don't come down. And we don't have this march towards the bottom or march towards the new normal, because we're not posting up sales at lower prices. And that's kind of what's happening right now. We don't have enough sales volume, and the sales volume we have are people who are willing to meet in the middle. And that middle is around the prices we've been dealing with for years. We're not seeing sellers reducing and buyers getting screaming deals and posting up the comps we need to really see a decreasing market, at least in our local markets here in Northern California. There are other places in the country where your mileage may vary, but across the board, everybody's suffering from these same impacts, where prices, macroeconomically, the forces should be saying prices are coming down. Inventory wise, the prices should be coming down, but the sellers just, as a group, are not bringing the prices down. They're removing their listings. We saw for every one listing that came on the market last month, 7 came off the market, canceled in Placerville. We saw for every one on the market in Phoenix, Arizona, 30 come off the market. So this is a big deal, and it's not having the same effect where prices come down. So we are waiting for something to give to see those prices come down. Now, my personal prediction is they're still going to slowly march down, but we're not going to see big, wild jumps down in price. What are you seeing, Dave?
Yeah, I think a couple of things here, Rich, is those folks that, they listed and they delisted as they were kind of testing the market. And we're talking about, an equity play there, what are they going to cash out? And the other part of that is how many of those folks need to turn around and buy another home, and they're not willing to buy another home in a more desirable area where they want to be. They're not willing to give up their 4% rate or 3% rate and buy with a 6.5% rate, go buy another home. The problem is there, and it's the psyche of a home combination of home buyer and home seller. They'll wait a year, they'll wait 6 months. And if rates are in the high fives, for example, they'll take a $50,000 loss and list that house and be willing to sell it, because now they're buying a new house in the fives.
Yeah.
Where if they just sold it and maybe they sold it for $50,000 more, it would have taken them 17 years to recapture that differential in rate. But it's the psyche of, shoot, I got this, 3 or 4% rate. I don't want to sell now. I'll sell later. I'll take a discount because now I can get a favorable interest rate. And I'm just looking at what my payment's going to be.
And I think that, like, looking at the psychology of that is a really important point, because really what I think, and tell me in the comments down below, folks, if I've got this right. But I think the root of this question, should I buy now in 2025 or not? Should I buy now or wait? I think the root of this isn't, Rich and Dave convinced me that buying a house is a good idea. I think if you're asking this question, you've already decided buying a house is a good idea. You would love to buy a house. You want to buy a house for your family, but you're afraid because of all the crazy crap going on in the world. And that's a rational position to be in. I'm not calling anybody out. It's reasonable to be scared right now about some of the stuff we're seeing. And so I'm thinking, I think the real question is, can I buy a house in 2025 and not lose my ass? I think that's really what people are asking us.
Yeah.
Can I buy a house in 2025 and not get screwed? Right. Or even more than that, because I think if you have a long enough time horizon, for the most part, you never get screwed in real estate. Can I buy in 2025 and not feel next month like I got screwed? And I think there's some psychological leaps we can talk through to help people work through some of that portion. Morgan Housel, The Psychology of Money, one of the best books ever written on money. If you listen to any podcast with Morgan Housel, he will really help wire your brain. He talks about how no financial decisions are rational. They're all emotional. And so when someone makes what you see as an irrational financial decision, it could be totally rational within the context of their emotional situation right now. And I think it's really rational to be afraid of getting screwed in this market right now. And
right. Well, I mean, Rich, you and I could speak from experience. I've bought homes where the market tanked after I bought it and, held on a little bit longer. I've bought and sold in every market that we've had. And I think the reality is, are you screwed because you bought your house and then 6 months later that same value might be, maybe you bought it for 500 and fast forward 6 months, you could have bought it for 485. Like, did you feel screwed because maybe you could have got a $15,000 discount? Well, it doesn't matter unless you're going to sell. I mean, you could look at the value of your house, monthly, and it really doesn't matter if you had built in, if you gained 15,000, are you going to go, skipping up and down the street and say, woohoo, I'm up 15,000 bucks? No, because you weren't going to sell it. So it's only relative if you're ready to buy and you're ready to sell, and you're never going to time it perfectly. You're never going to time the bottom perfectly. You're never going to time the top perfectly. And that's why we're seeing all these homes come on and get delisted, because these folks just kept thinking it's going to go up and up and up, and they don't want to miss the boat. What they do, they kind of miss the boat. So
and I think there's some hedges you can build in around that to help yourself feel better. So if you need to sell this home in a short period of time, and so this comes down to the 5 real estate fundamentals, regardless of any market you're in. Dave and I talk about this all the time. We've been doing this. I'm 20 plus years. This is year 21. I think Dave's like 25, 26. What makes a good buyer and a safe purchase and a hedge against future problems hasn't changed in 20, 25 years. We talk about these things: having good savings, including emergency fund, having good credit, having a long time horizon, being able to make the payment at this interest rate, no matter what. And if rates come down, you get to refi. Great. And this Saturday, I will have, we have an old podcast episode on this, but this Saturday, I have an updated version of the 5 real estate fundamentals coming out on the channel. So make sure you hit the like and subscribe button, click that little bell icon so you get notified every time we drop a video, and you can watch a deep dive into each of these 5 categories I just listed in that video. But I think the most important one in this conversation, should I buy now or wait, is that timeline piece. And we'll go into some of the others, but the timeline piece, if you're going to hold this home 5 years, 7 years, or 10 years, but 5 at a bare minimum, then if it goes down, it doesn't matter, like Dave's talking about. You're not going to lose anything, because by the time you sell, things, historically speaking, and, again, past performance is no indication of future performance, and we can't guarantee real estate will go up. Nobody can guarantee real estate will go up. But historical trend wise, owning real estate, especially in California, has been a pretty good bet in most periods for most people. In any one short period, there are moments where you can get hosed. And that's why timeline is important. So if you've got your 5 fundamentals nailed down and you want to buy a house right now, and the thing holding you back is, I don't want to feel like I bought at the peak, I don't want to get screwed, then I think the hedge to that is, how long am I going to hold the house? If it's 1, 2, 3, 4 years, you might get screwed. Don't do it. If it's 5 or more years, don't pay attention to value. Buy, enjoy your home. And when you look at it, when you go to sell, that's not going to be a problem for you.
Well, and I think the other piece that we've talked about, Rich, is really important for people to understand here is, let's just say it's 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, and you don't have a ton of equity in that home and you got to get out of Dodge. Well, there's a good chance, and we have plenty of stories and past clients that are in this situation. You convert it to a rental. Maybe you don't put everything you have down. We'll talk through that, but it's okay. You might be in a position where right now you're not thinking about being a landlord, but 3, 4, 5 years from now, even if you do have a lot of equity, you might still consider being a landlord. Does not mean you have to sell your home. A lot of people have built wealth by, buying an owner occupied property, not buying the top of the market property, living there for a while. And then whether they're moving in a different neighborhood in the same county, or they're getting out of the state, whatever that might be, is they convert that to a rental. And if you have a 30-year fixed mortgage, your costs are relatively fixed.
Yeah.
And I've been looking at rents. I have rentals and I look at historical rentals. There's no indication that the bottom's going to fall out on the rental market.
Right.
And so if values and rents and someone that's a renter today, if you watch, your rents probably, unless you're in a unique scenario, has gradually gone up. So in 5 years from now, let's just say you buy a house and your mortgage payment is $1,000 more a month than what you could rent for. Well, in 5 years, there's a good probability that rents then are going to be similar to what your mortgage payment is today. I'm not guaranteeing any of that, but that's how it trends. And a lot of people that become landlords is they've lived in that house for a while, rents have caught up, and now they're either break even or cash positive when they go to buy their next home without putting a significant chunk of money down.
Yeah, which is always an option. And this isn't like a do as I say, not as I do. For the house I'm sitting in right now, the house my studio's in, I bought in 2008. I'd been in the business for 3 years at that point in the Great Recession. I knew 100% the value of that house was going to drop like a stone. Dave helped me finance it. He was on this ride with me. But it didn't matter. I also knew I was going to hold the house for a long period of time, and I'm 16 years in, 17 years in to owning this house. And so I lost 50,000 in value between 2008 and 2010. My house went down 50,000 in value. It didn't bother me one bit because I had no intention of selling. As I sit here today, I am multiple six figures up on this. I'm way up on this house, more up on this house than any stock investment that I have because of my time horizon. Now, had I bought in 2008 and had to sell in 2010, I'd have gotten screwed. And that's why when it comes to factors to decide no go on buying a house in 2005, well, interest rate probably isn't it. Prices coming down dramatically probably isn't it. But time horizon is definitely one of the ones. If you're going to sell or be forced to sell or have to sell in less than 5 years, in my opinion, I would call that a no-go for 2005. But if you're 5 or more years and you meet all the fundamentals, I think go for it. There's less competition on the market. There's less buyers out there. There's not as, the inventory's up. You can kind of have your pick of the listings. You can negotiate a little better. A bunch of experiences we haven't had for years in the real estate market. But if you're going to sell in less than 5 years, for me, it's a no-go. I don't know where you stand on that one, Dave.
Yeah, well, I think the other piece to that too, Rich, is, talking about your scenario, you bought at a time where, knock on wood, hopefully we don't ever see that. And there's no indication that we're going to see any financial environment like what we saw. I think we talked offline too, the folks that were losing their homes were folks that, well, a lot of different folks, but, negative amortization loans, bad lending requirements, guidelines, that really contributed to, and exacerbated the, that great, housing crisis that we had, right after you or during when you bought your home. And so, is the market going to crash? I know we're talking about another, episode on that, but right now there's no indication and there's no economic situation going on that is near remotely close to what we experienced 15 years ago.
Yeah, I think that's true. And that's why when we talked about our prices coming down, yes, they're coming down, but they're coming down in a very slow, very measured way. I see all the time in our comments section, Dave, people being like, it's going to crash 40%, it's going to crash 60%. Yeah. Everybody, don't listen to these guys. Don't buy anything. It's crashing 60%. And I think it's very easy for people to look back at, well, what was the last time we had a big financial crisis? What happened? without looking into the nuance of what caused that, right? Which was a
Right.
lending industry out of control, just handing out loans to anybody. You just had to say, I make 500 grand a year. And they're like, great, you can have this loan. Right. Oh, and you don't want to put anything down. Great. You don't even want to pay your full payment a month. Sure. You can have a negative amortization loan where you're paying less than the interest every month. And what you owe is going up every month. That kind of insanity didn't come back to the market. That kind of stuff isn't happening. So we don't have this wave of foreclosures waiting for us. We don't have this wave of people who are underwater who are just going to strategically decide, I'm never going to be upside right in this house again. I'm going to walk away. We have people with real skin in the game, real money on the line, real equity, real great interest rates that aren't going to just start defaulting like crazy. I think the recent headline of underwater mortgages was they rose from 4% last year to 6% of mortgages are underwater this year. 6% is nothing compared to what we saw in the Great Recession. So we're not going to see a big foreclosure wave that causes massive 40-60% drops in value. I do expect to see drops continue this year, maybe even next year if the macroeconomic environment doesn't change. But I think it's going to be a slow march, not a big wave. So if massive purchase price drops is your criteria, I don't think that's a good one to be sitting on right now. Or for you, then it's just going to be a no-go because I don't think you're going to see those by the end of the year.
Yeah, and if you're someone that thinks we might see a 2 or 3% drop in the next year, and you meet the 5 fundamentals, the criteria, offer 3% less on the house. And maybe you'll buy it of what true future market value would be. I mean, there's, we'll get into that. Those are separate conversations. But nothing says you have to pay over and above right now. If you're in a situation where you don't have to, be prepared to go, work with us, make sure that, you understand all your criteria, your 5 fundamentals, and time is on your side.
Yeah, I think. And those, so again, I'd point everybody to that 5 fundamentals video. It's coming out on Saturday. Watch that. But right now in 2025, if you're trying to decide, am I the kind of buyer who should buy? Well, do you have good credit? Do you have a long time horizon? Do you have savings for down payment, 3% down payment, 3% closing costs, and an emergency fund with at least 3 to 6 months of your living expenses in the bank? So if something happened to your job, you'll be okay. Do you have stable recession-proof employment, or as recession-proof as you can get, right? Are you in one of the industries that's really under fire right now and laying people off like crazy? Probably not the time for you to buy a house. But if you're in a stable industry, sure. And why would you choose to buy in this environment if you meet the 5 fundamentals? Because there's less buyers out there, because there's less competition, because you can get your pick of the litter on houses now and ride it out. And of course, the other piece of that is, can you make this payment at the current interest rates no matter what? Will you be doing backflips if it drops to 5% and you're in a position to refi and it gets better? Great. But if you are counting on it getting interest rates getting better and counting on you being able to refi to a better interest rate to be able to afford this because you're on the ragged edge, then that's a no-go. So this is really a market for well-funded, well-qualified buyers with clear expectations and long time horizons. It's not the market, in my opinion, for people on the ragged edge of affordability, people who are scraping together every dime to make this happen, people who are, worrying about their jobs, or people who are going to be just tapped out. They're going to throw every penny they've got at this. And on day one, when they make the first mortgage payment, the savings account's $100. It's not the market for those kind of people. And if you're worried about getting screwed and buying at the peak of the market, you really can't time the market. What screws you is not when you buy, it's when you sell. So if you're going to sell in the next couple of years, yeah, it's probably a no-go for you. But if you're buying and you're going to hold for 5 or 10 years, then I think you can buy with confidence today as long as you meet those 5 fundamentals. Those are more important than all of the noise in the media right now. Those are tried and true, tested. If you meet those criteria, you are in a good position to safely take on the homeownership journey, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, Rich. I think that's spot on.
All right. I think that's a good place to wrap it here. So, of course, we can't say to you, individual viewer, should you buy or sell, buy or not buy in 2025. But what we can say is, here's some criteria to think about. Here's some ways to frame your thinking. Here's some criteria to run yourself through to then get to the point where you can decide for yourself whether now is the right time for you or not. And if you want more in-depth analysis like this, if you want to see the next 4 installments of this series answering the internet's top 5 real estate questions, click that like button, click subscribe, hit the little bell icon so you don't miss the next video. As always, thanks for watching. Thanks for making it to the end with us. I'm Rich Curtis.
And I'm Dave Miller. Thanks, Rich.
We'll see you on the next one.